So this is actually a story that goes way back, that I've been hiding from my parents until I became older, from my teenage years back in the 90s. Me and my friend Sarah were just hanging out one night. We were bored and tried to escape the mundane. Well, that's how this story begins. It's the dead of winter. A blizzard is howling outside, and my friend Sarah and I are sitting around, bored out of our minds. Our brilliant idea was to make some quick cash by offering to shovel driveways in the neighborhood. I mean, why not, right? We needed some excitement in our lives, and some money could get teenagers a whole lot more than what they can around these times. The response from our neighbors was mostly a harsh no. A few would say all right then. Most folks weren't too keen on the idea, probably thinking we were crazy to be out in that storm or didn't want to give up their money. But a couple of brave souls agreed, and we set to work, shoveling snow like our lives depended on it. Every neighborhood has that one eerie house that everyone whispers about. Ours was no exception. The house stood at the end of a quiet street, shadows clinging to it like a bad reputation, and the walls looked like they could collapse at any given time. When we approached, Sarah and I exchanged nervous glances. Should we even bother knocking? But curiosity got the best of us, and we knocked. After a seemingly eternal pause, the door creaked open, and a raspy voice muttered, "Yeah, I could use some help." Turns out the man inside agreed to let us shovel his driveway. We got started, and it took us about an hour to finish up. To say the place was creepy would be an understatement. Sarah got second thoughts about going in there and said we should probably just walk home. But I had no intention of letting our work go to waste. We approached the door and knocked. A couple of seconds went by. We just stood there in silence, listening to our own breath while waiting, wondering if he had tricked us. "Come on in, the door's open," he croaked, his words sending shivers down my spine. I exchanged a glance with Sarah, and we reluctantly stepped inside. The air felt heavy, and I swear my heart was pounding loud enough for him to hear. The interior was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The man took ages to rustle up some cash, which he claimed was in the kitchen. While he walked towards the kitchen, we agreed to stand at the entrance and wait for him. But as I said, it took him ages. After a good 4 minutes of complete silence of me and Sarah just looking at each other, we asked him if could find any cash. He told us that he was still looking, but we could just come to the kitchen and wait. We cautiously approached the kitchen, one small step at a time, Sarah holding onto my arm with a tight grip. The atmosphere was tense. As we got close, I caught a glimpse of the man's reflection in a dusty picture frame. Time seemed to freeze as the man's reflection stared back at us from the picture frame, his eyes darker than the shadows that enveloped the room. He wasn't searching for cash. His fingers danced nervously over something concealed in his grasp. The air grew thick with tension, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in my ears. And then, as if the universe conspired against us, his grip faltered, and the object slipped from his hand. The metallic tang of dread filled the room as the knife plummeted, its descent a haunting whisper in the dimness. A sickening symphony of fate played out in slow motion. A symphony only Sarah and I were privy to. The blade hit the floor with a chilling clatter that shattered the fragile silence. The moment felt frozen in time. Panic surged through us, and we turned and bolted out of that house like our lives depended on it. We sprinted through the blizzard, the wind biting at our faces until we reached my front door. Breathless and terrified, we exchanged a look that said it all. Happy to be alive, but scared enough to never tell our parents about this. We knew we should have told our parents about what happened and called the police. But our parents were a bit on the strict side, and as we didn't know better back then, and we didn't want to get into trouble, we kept this to ourselves. Night turned into morning, and we sat there wide-eyed and shaken, wondering what we had just stumbled into. We didn't sleep a wink that night. Me and my wife had been needing a break from the everyday life and just spend some alone time together. We rented this cute cabin in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by snow-covered trees as far as the eye could see. The snow was falling gently, but soon enough it turned into a full-blown blizzard. We figured we would take a walk before the blizzard gets wild. So we're out there, snow crunching under our boots, throwing snowballs at each other now and then. After a while, we figure we should head back, as we have gotten pretty far away from our cabin. On our way back, it starts to snow heavily. It ruined our tracks, so we were not quite sure where to go since we weren't known in this area. As we keep walking, we spot what must have been fresh footprints leading to another cabin nearby. It looked cozy enough from the outside, so we decide to knock on the door to ask for shelter until the blizzard settles down. This guy in his mid-50s opens the door, and he wasn't the guy we were hoping to see open the door. He gave me the creeps. But you can never judge a book by the cover, so we decided to ask anyways. His eyes darted around like he was hiding something, but he invited us in. The cabin was warm and all, but it felt off somehow, like it was watching us. As we settled in and told him about our situation, we heard these weird noises coming from the attic. Not gonna lie, it was spooky as hell. I asked the guy what it was, and he just brushed it off like it was no big deal. Said it was probably just the wind or something. But the sounds kept going. At this point, my wife was looking at me like, "What did you get us into?" Mr. Creepy Host wasn't exactly Mr. Chatty. He didn't say much, just stared and occasionally mumbled something incoherent. So we decided to call it a night and hit the sack. The guy doesn't budge from the living room. He just plops down on the couch and keeps sitting there watching us. We hinted that we wanted to go to sleep, hoping he'd take the hint and leave us to it. But nope, he just stayed put, staring at the fire like he was waiting for something. My wife and I whispered to each other, talking about what was going on. I tried to calm her down by saying that it is kind of unsafe for him, that two strangers are coming into his home. After some more discussing back and forth, the man asks, "Is everything all right over there?" My wife and I exchanged glances, and that's when we knew we had to get out of there, blizzard or no blizzard. We decided that frostbite was a better option than staying in that cabin. So we told him that we didn't want to interrupt anymore and it's better if we just left and went back home. So we bundled up and trudged back into the storm, hoping to find some sort of shelter on our way back home. Luckily, we stumbled upon another cabin not too far away. This time, it was inhabited by a sweet old couple who welcomed us with open arms. We told them about the strange encounter we had just had, and they exchanged worried glances. They told us that the cabin we visited earlier belonged to a person who had died 3 years ago. The older couple told us that no one had lived there since, and they had no idea why that man was in there, acting all weird. This led us to think of what the noises on the attic could have been. This made us wonder who that man was and what his intention was. If it really was to just be polite and let us in for shelter, or if he had some ill intention while we were asleep. I am glad that I can only wonder, and that we never found out, since it could have turned out extremely bad. This is a pretty bizarre and unsettling experience my mom and I had last year on Christmas Eve. We were on our way to join the rest of the family at a cabin, about an hour's drive away from our home. So my mom had some last-minute work stuff to wrap up, which delayed our departure. I thought, why not wait for her so we could have some company on the road? After all, it's just an hour's drive, not too far, but definitely better with some company. As we finally hit the road, we realized the gas tank was pretty low. I mean, we didn't want to get stuck in the middle of nowhere on Christmas Eve, so we decided to stop at this small gas station. It was pretty late, and being the day before Christmas, there weren't many folks around. In fact, we were the only ones there. After filling up the tank, just as we were about to leave, this dude suddenly appears out of nowhere and starts knocking on our window. My mom and I got scared as fuck. I mean, we didn't see anyone hanging around when we were pumping gas, and this guy just pops up out of the blue. He starts giving us this story about how his car broke down up the road a bit, and he needs a ride to the nearest town. Seemed innocent enough, except for the fact that we couldn't see any footprints in the fresh snow from the direction he claimed to have come from. I mean, it was snowing like crazy, but not so much that his footprints have already been erased. So if he had just walked there, we should have seen his tracks. He speaks of the holiday spirit, of the warmth of family, and the joy of sharing laughter and presents on Christmas morning. He appeals to our empathy, describing the bitter cold outside and the uncertain fate that awaits him if he's left to fend for himself in the blizzard. His story is a web of emotion. My gut was screaming at me that something wasn't adding up. Plus, the whole line seemed way too rehearsed. Call me paranoid, but I wasn't about to let this sketchy situation ruin our Christmas plans. Luckily for us, I was the one driving, not my mom. She's a way to caring person, and this kind of shit is the thing that she would without a doubt fall for. The man started to get frustrated and tried to open the passenger door where my mom was sitting. Without even rolling the window up, I hit the gas and we peeled out of that gas station. As a car started to move, we could hear a shrilling sound, thinking that the man just screamed at us. My mom was a bit mad at me, saying things like, "Think if that was you, wouldn't you want somebody to help you?" We kept driving, and sure enough, no car was pulled to the side as he said his car was, which made my mom second-guess her judgment of the man. We didn't stop until we reached the cabin where the rest of the family was waiting. As my mom stepped out, she noticed that the car in her side, where the man was standing, had a scratch all the way along the car, which means that the shrilling sound we heard as we took off was probably because of the man holding something sharp in his hands, just waiting for us to open the door.